Hey everyone, welcome in to another daily editorial here on the KE Report. This is a special daily editorial that we are getting an update from Skeena Resources, traded on the TSX under the symbol SKE and on the OTCQX under the symbol SKREF. I'm chatting with the company's Vice President of Exploration and Resource Development, Paul Geddes. Now, Paul, we are following up on a news release that came out just this morning, February 17th. We're also doing a video interview on this because you have some supporting slides here that can better explain this discovery and the concept around this discovery. That's where I'm going to start with here. Is the title of the news release says Skeena discovers new in-pit mineralization at Eskay Creek. The results are 4.8 grams per ton gold equivalent over 30.5 meters. Paul, I have to ask you, this is all based on infill drilling. So how do you make a new discovery on infill drilling?
Well, that's a great question, Corey, and thanks for having me again to discuss this and elaborate our findings. Basically, I think what I'm going to do is build up towards that question, if you don't mind. We're going to revisit our geological model here, just so we can put this into context for everybody. Now, again, if we just look at what everything was historically back in the day in the Jurassic, we had our basement rocks, we had synvolcanic faults within a main structure, we had a period of quiescence, we have these lower mudstones. Again, we push up into the volcanic pile, we get those rhyolite sequence, and then we get the black smokers and the exhalative environment that took place. And these are the contact mudstones that were historically mined. And then again, anything in the dark blue up at surface is basically the seawater. Now, what's happened is you've always got the mineralization being flowed through fluids up these synvolcanic faults. They basically act like a plumbing system to get up to the seafloor. And this is where the real magic happened, was at the contact mudstone. This is where Barrick had all the extreme gold enrichment and the silver as well as all the epithermal suite of elements, the nasty stuff, which thankfully they mined out for us. We also found in 2020 this new even lower and lower mudstone replacement style mineralization. And we know that these faults are fertile because these volcanic feeders are manifested as the 22 zone, the 21C zone on the property, and the water tower zone as well. Anyways, this all gets capped off after that period of quiescence by basalt rocks. So basically barren, just capping rocks that sealed the system. But in one instance, and up until now, we thought this was the only instance, is we get the hanging wall zone. And what the hanging wall zone represents is just that fault being reactivated through that cover of basalt rock. And then the mineralization propagates up through it. And again, we thought that was just a one-hit wonder. And I'm sure the previous operators thought that way as well. Just to give you an example, this is a section through the hanging wall zone. Again, it's hosted in the hanging wall basalts here. It occurs above the contact mudstone, which you see here in this shaded portion. And it's a synvolcanic structure that has deep, deep roots that goes way below the contact mudstone into the rhyolites, even further into the even lower mudstone. Now, the big thing here is that it was preferentially sampled by the previous operators. Again, think about what Eskay Creek was back in the day with $200, $300 US an ounce gold. They needed high grades to warrant any economic mineralization to actually get mined and turned into ore. You can see here, though, in these historical drill holes, they had 6.5 grams per ton over 14, 2.5 over 16, again, selective sampling. And this is a recent drill hole that we put out in our, not this release, but one previous to that, where we ended up getting 14 grams over 25.5 meters. Just fabulous type of mineralization. But let's go to our actual discovery, okay? To give you the two highlights from the press release, basically 4.5 grams per ton gold equivalent over 20.5 meters. This is one of the highlights. And the second highlight, which is a hole very, very nearby, is 4.8 grams per ton over 30.5 meters. So what I'll do is I'll put us into a vertical section through the deposit and through the 21C zone, and we can look at that a little bit more. So in this brightly colored orange, this is the new mineralization that we've outlined here. And in the blue, you can see all of our drill hole composites and assay traces. The only reason that we were really drilling this area was because we were trying to convert the 21C zone, which is located down here, from the inferred to the measured and the indicated category. Now, what you're looking at here in this rounded sort of gold dark blob, that's the actual outline of the mineralization from the block model. Another point to bring out here too is you can see our blue traces. There's a lot more mineralization that we've added to this area that we didn't even really focus on in this press release. What I'm most excited about, though, is what's happening here in this newly named 21C hanging wall zone. So essentially what's happened is we've got one of these synvolcanic feeders that came up, dragged a bunch of the mineralization with it. You can see the grades that are associated with that, and basically is opening up a new area. So your original question was, well, how do you have a discovery through infill drilling? Well, the reason being, as I said in the previous slide, is that our previous operators essentially never sampled any of the mineralization that occurred in these hanging wall basalts. Even though the rocks looked really good and there were plenty of sulfides and pyrite and whatnot, they probably got burnt too many times sampling other areas. Now, the reason why it's running here with grade as opposed to other places is because it's proximal to this feeder, to this synvolcanic fault. Now, what does that mean in the bigger picture? Okay, so if we do a long section through the long axis of the 21C zone, keep in mind the 21C zone is approximately 700 meters long here, and we're only looking at a very narrow slice in this section. This is only 20 meters each side. You can see the occurrence where our new mineralization occurred. There's basically a gap in the drilling. You can see in white, just an isolated hit that was historically sampled. Everything else around it wasn't even touched. Again, same situation over here. And this is a combination of 2018, 2019, and 2020 drilling that's informing this sort of southern lobe, shall we say. And at the time, we didn't really think too much of it until it really started hanging together. You know, for me personally, if I drill a hole and I find a new discovery in a new area, you know, a one-hit wonder doesn't constitute a zone. It's only when you get multiple holes into that area, you can wrap a wireframe around it and corroborate it. In my mind, that's when you can start calling it a zone. So I guess the other thing to bring to home here is that this area in between the two lobes is largely, well, basically unexplored. And if there are any historical drill holes in there, they were never sampled. Again, over here in the same area. And you can see the correlation. If you look at the 21C zone that's sitting below the pit, this is all rhyolite hosted. So this would be the base of the feeder zone. What's going to be interesting is to find out how much further these new hanging wall zones go up to surface, because in the hanging wall zone proper, which we started with, you know, that thing comes all the way up, well, literally right to surface. We've also got a feeder down here in the 21C zone. We've got some limited mineralization that occurs up here, but again, largely unexplored. Now, the corollary of this too is bringing it back down, testing the even lower mudstone and the lower mudstone sequences. So we know that we're in the plane of a fault here. It's just a matter of, well, doing exploration. You can see here some blue intersections and some white ones. So the white ones, again, are historical. The blue ones are ours. There are sniffs. So it's just a matter of getting in and drilling it, really.
Okay, Paul, I want to focus on this new upper zone. Let's call it the upper, well, 21C hanging wall zone. There have been some drill holes that it looks like come down here. You're saying that none of those were sampled. Can you sample any of those, or do you guys need to drill all new holes here to test out this whole new area, I guess we can call it?
Yeah, that's a fair assumption. Unfortunately, we can't return to any of the historical core because, well, it was all disposed of. It's sitting in the waste piles in Albino Lake, so we have nothing to refer to. What'll happen is we'll basically have to go in and repopulate with additional drilling to try and expand these zones. So even though it's, you know, sitting within and proximal to the resource and it's inside the pit, that doesn't discount it as exploration, because the whole point of exploration is to add ounces. I guess the most important take home right now is that we've basically converted what was originally considered as waste rock in the PEA, and now we've basically created mineralization, which, you know, we don't know what the answer is going to be yet till the resource comes out, but is going to translate to additional resources, and potentially, if it meets the grade, which I believe it will, transfer into additional reserves. So
Oh,
it only helps our cause, really.
okay, so that's important. All of this was classified as waste rock. Now you're showing there's some mineralization there. We'll see what the other drilling yields. Can you give us a little bit more color on that zone to the right of these recent drill results? You said there was some drill holes that encountered mineralization 2-3 years ago. What were some of those grades?
Some of the grades were a little spurious. They were variable. It could be 1 or 2 grams over 10 to 30 meters. We also had intersections that were higher grade than that, like as an example, comparable to what we're looking at right now in the 4 gram per ton range over 30 meters or so.
So then in terms of follow-up work, does this just mean that there's that much more exploration to do here on this area that is closer to surface to see what could be economic?
Yep, that's exactly right. In my mind, shallow ounces are cheap ounces because they're easy to access. And to be honest with you, if you look at where the PEA pit outline is here, we're taking all that rock regardless to get all of the other material. This is just going to be bonus, and well, I hate to say it, but gravy and upside on top of what we already have.
So what makes this rock economic? Obviously, you do need a certain grade to run it through all the production facilities, but what in your eyes would be economic grade?
I would have to say, but that's a bit of a loaded question, unfortunately. See, so if we were to have 4 gram material, obviously very simple. It's going to make the grade. That's no problem whatsoever. But again, considering that was originally waste and the higher grade stuff, the 3 to 4 gram material underneath it is going to pay for it anyway. I would say that as it stands right now, if it was 2 grams, 2.5 grams, that would be absolutely fine, and that would probably end up getting pushed through the mill.
Okay. Do you have an idea of what the attack strategy is going to be then in terms of this new area?
Basically, what it comes down to is we're just going to have to expand. So we're putting budgets together right now that are going to involve our regional exploration and near mine exploration programs. I think the best way to put it is stay tuned.
Okay. Well, thank you for the update. Let's move on.
No worries. And again, that dominant mineralization control, I think we've emphasized the point that we need these synvolcanic structures to make everything happen. But if we go back to our slide and we look at the black smokers, we look at the synvolcanic faults, the new replacement deposits, and then the cap rock, again, hanging wall zone, we knew it was there. It's on the books already within the resource. The new 21C hanging wall zone occurs up here, up on the top left. But again, that opens up a large amount of exploration potential for us. Because as an example, we know that on the east side of the deposit, we have another synvolcanic fault. Well, it's just a matter of going in and testing it and seeing what we may come up with.
Interesting. So it sounds like you guys have a lot of exploration upcoming. What's the news flow going to be like then? Because you guys are drilling out this project. So it's not just this new zone that you're looking at here.
That's correct. So I'm happy to say that we've completed the entire phase 1 and obviously the phase 2 infill programs for Eskay Creek. And again, just to remind everybody, those programs were solely designed to convert inferred resources within the open pit to the indicated and the measured categories. Again, we got lucky here along the way by discovering a little bit more mineralization, and that's testament to the geological team up at site. That is all complete. That information now, as the assays trickle in, will be fed into the Eskay Creek resource update, which is due in the spring of this year. That new mineralization that we just highlighted will actually be incorporated into the resource estimate, so that's good. What we also did was a 5,000 meter exploration program in the near mine environment, and we completed that, I believe, a week and a half ago. Unfortunately, the labs are quite busy still, so we're looking at probably in excess of a month turnaround time before we see those results. But we did follow up on some of those areas that I was highlighting in between the two lobes of mineralization. And then ultimately, we'll be continuing to see continued news flow for the remainder. And we're getting ready for Eskay Creek Reserve declaration. when we do our PFS, and then ultimately our feasibility study in Q4.
Okay. So there's a lot of news coming, especially in the near term when you look at all of these events heading into just Q2 of this year. I hope that this explained a little bit around this new discovery, I guess we can call it, and what the potential might be here. Obviously, it is still very early for you guys because of this relook at this, what was considered waste rock that might turn into economic rock. We will see what comes out of it. But Paul, I do appreciate you giving us this general rundown. If anybody has any follow-up questions for Paul regarding these results or any of the programs going on at Skeena Resources, please email me, fleck@kereport.com. I will get those answered for you. And if warranted, we can follow up with another video interview. But hey, Paul, I really do appreciate you taking the time and putting together this presentation to better understand these results.
Thanks so much, Corey. Really appreciate it.